What if the way you speak to a man, your timing, your tone, the words you choose, could shift his behavior without a single confrontation? What if your silence, your presence, or your withdrawal were not passive at all, but a form of feedback so powerful that it rewired how he responded to you? Most women are taught to be clear, communicative, reasonable. But what if those strategies alone are not enough? Not because you're failing, but because they bypass the instinctual layers of how behavior is truly shaped. This is where the science of behavior, long buried under self-help trends and romantic idealism, returns to the surface with quiet authority. B.F. Skinner didn't talk about love or heartbreak, but he understood what governs our responses to them. He studied the one force that subtly governs our relationships more than love itself: reinforcement. You're not here to manipulate. You're here to understand the invisible currents that shape emotional closeness and distance. You're here because somewhere inside you felt it, when a small shift in your reaction causes a man to step closer or pull away, and you want to stop reacting blindly. You want to start responding with awareness. Feedback in behavioral terms is not just praise or criticism. It's everything your environment says back to a person after they act. A sigh, a turned back, a soft smile, a cold absence, the frequency of a text, the warmth or coolness of your tone. All of these are forms of feedback, and they act like signals to the brain. Repeat this. Avoid that. Come closer. Stay away. In relationships, most of us are giving feedback all the time, but unconsciously. Sometimes we reinforce the very behaviors we resent. We reward emotional distance by chasing it. We punish vulnerability by reacting with criticism, and we don't even know we're doing it. Skinner's world wasn't romantic, but it was real. He showed that behavior follows patterns, not feelings, that every action has a consequence, and that consequence teaches the person whether or not to repeat the behavior. And while love may feel spontaneous, behavioral reinforcement is never random. It is structured, even in its silence. So here's the truth. If you want to influence how a man responds to you, not through fear or control, but through behavioral clarity, you must become conscious of the feedback you're offering. You must become fluent in the language of reinforcement, because your nervous system already speaks it, and so does his. This chapter is only the beginning. We'll go deeper into how different types of reinforcement shape male behavior, how to use them wisely, and how to protect your emotional clarity in the process. But for now, pause and ask yourself, have I been rewarding the very behavior I wish would stop? There's a moment in every relationship, usually subtle, almost unspoken, where a behavior either grows or dies. He jokes at your expense. Do you laugh it off or go silent? He calls late at night without commitment. Do you answer with softness or boundary? These micro moments teach, they reinforce. B.F. Skinner taught us that behavior doesn't exist in isolation. It survives because of its consequences. And the science that explains this is called operant conditioning, a framework that unveils why people repeat certain actions and abandon others. Not because of who they are, but because of what those actions produce. In simple terms, when a behavior is followed by a satisfying consequence, it tends to be repeated. When followed by discomfort or nothing at all, it tends to weaken or disappear. This isn't just a theory from a dusty textbook, it's alive in your relationships. Every time you smile, forgive, resist, retreat, or respond, you're either reinforcing or punishing a behavior. Let's break it down. Reinforcement is anything that increases the likelihood of a behavior recurring. There are two types. Positive reinforcement, adding something pleasurable, for example, expressing appreciation when he shows vulnerability can increase the chance he'll open up again. Negative reinforcement, removing something unpleasant. For instance, stopping criticism when he takes initiative can encourage that initiative to continue. Punishment, on the other hand, is anything that decreases a behavior. It can be active, like a sharp word, or passive, like emotional withdrawal. While it may feel effective in the moment, punishment often breeds resentment, defensiveness, or secrecy. It suppresses behavior, but it rarely teaches what to do instead. But here's the deeper truth women often overlook. Inconsistent reinforcement, when attention or affection is given unpredictably, creates the strongest attachments. Not healthy ones, but obsessive ones. This is the pattern most emotionally unavailable men unknowingly install in women. It's not because they are irresistible. It's because they are erratic. When the response you receive is inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, you become hypervigilant. You start scanning for signs, adjusting your behavior, losing clarity. You become conditioned to chase, and that chase becomes your emotional addiction. Skinner would say, the behavior is not about love. It's about the reinforcement schedule. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Diane. Diane spent years with a man who offered just enough affection to keep her hopeful. He would disappear for days, only to return with flowers. He avoided commitment, but offered intimacy in moments of her despair. Diane wasn't weak. She was conditioned. Every time she cried and he came close, she learned that pain brought him back. So pain became a strategy, unconscious, automatic. Her friends called her needy. But what they didn't see was the schedule, the invisible structure reinforcing her pattern. Diane wasn't broken. She was responding to the laws of behavior. And aren't we all? When Skinner examined human behavior, he saw not drama, but design. Every action has a function. Every repeated behavior has been rewarded somehow, even if the reward is merely the absence of abandonment. He would say, the environment shapes the organism, but awareness can shape the environment. So ask yourself now, are you rewarding avoidance and inconsistency or presence and growth? Because what you reward, consciously or not, is what you will continue to receive. You might think love fades because of incompatibility, because of miscommunication, because of timing. But Skinner would argue it often fades because the reinforcement schedule collapses. At the start of a relationship, the feedback loop is immediate. You smile, he responds. He texts, you reply. There's a rhythm, predictable, frequent, but then something shifts. Response is slow, attention becomes sporadic. Your nervous system senses the change before your mind can explain it. You feel anxious, unsure, alert. Why? Because the schedule of reinforcement has changed. In behavioral science, reinforcement isn't just about what you give. It's about when and how often you give it. This timing creates powerful patterns, some healthy, some dangerously addictive. Let's begin with continuous reinforcement. This is when a behavior is reinforced every time it happens. In a relationship, this might look like consistent appreciation, frequent validation, and reliable communication. This kind of reinforcement builds initial trust. It's how bonds form. But here's the trap. Continuous reinforcement is fragile. The moment the pattern breaks, the behavior starts to fade. If he stops responding every time you reach out, you feel it instantly. The absence is loud. Then comes intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful and the most manipulative. This is when a behavior is only reinforced sometimes, like a man who disappears and then showers you with affection, like kind words after weeks of distance, like an apology followed by another cycle of neglect. Your brain doesn't know when the reward will come, so it holds on, hoping, trying, waiting. This is the same schedule used in casinos. Not every pull wins, but sometimes it does. And it's that sometimes that keeps people playing long after they've lost themselves. The same goes for emotional roulette. Women often stay not because the relationship is nourishing, but because it's unpredictable. The uncertainty becomes a drug. Each small moment of closeness feels like a jackpot, but it's not love. It's behavioral captivity. Skinner studied variable ratio schedules, where rewards come after an unpredictable number of responses. This schedule, he found, produces the highest, most persistent rates of behavior. It's what keeps gamblers glued to machines, and it's what keeps many women clinging to inconsistent men. But here's the truth most won't tell you. The same system that traps can also liberate. When you become conscious of reinforcement schedules, you can choose to change them. You can begin to offer deliberate reinforcement, not out of desperation, but with emotional intelligence. You can reinforce behavior that reflects your values and go quiet, not out of punishment, but to let inconsistency extinguish itself. You can decide that presence gets warmth and avoidance gets nothing. And most importantly, you can stop reinforcing your own anxiety by obsessively checking, reaching, chasing. Because your behavior also reinforces your emotional states. If you constantly seek reassurance after silence, you're teaching your brain that silence equals danger. But if you meet that silence with grounded withdrawal, you send a new message. My peace is not up for negotiation. Skinner would say, you're always training someone. The question is, what are you teaching them to expect from you? So ask yourself now, are you applying reinforcement consciously, or are you stuck in a schedule that someone else controls? Power is not in how much you give. It's in when, why, and for what. You don't change a relationship by demanding a different version of someone. You change it by reinforcing the version that aligns with your values. This is the essence of shaping, a concept central to B.F. Skinner's behavioral theory. It's the process of reinforcing successive approximations of a desired behavior, gradually guiding someone toward a more complete pattern of response. In love, this isn't control, it's clarity. Most women were never taught this. Instead, you were taught to over-explain, over-function, plead, or tolerate. You were taught to wait for a man to mature or figure it out. But Skinner's framework shows a different path, one that begins with your perception of behavior, not his intention. Let's start with what shaping actually means in relationships. Imagine you're trying to build a deeper emotional connection. You don't get it overnight. But if, for instance, a man shares something slightly vulnerable with you, something beyond surface-level chatter, you can respond in a way that reinforces his openness, not by clinging or overpraising, but with quiet presence, sincere engagement, maybe even a gentle touch. This feedback tells his nervous system, this behavior brings connection. It increases the likelihood it will happen again. You're not changing him, you're rewarding a seed. The power of shaping lies in this. You don't need to demand the final behavior. You reinforce the direction of it. Small emotional risks, little moments of respect, acts of accountability. And you do it consistently, not desperately. When those steps disappear, you go still. When they appear, you stay open. But shaping requires that you know what you're aiming for. This is where many women falter. They want better, but they haven't defined what better means in behavioral terms. Emotional safety, mutual presence, transparency, respectful disagreement. Set relationship goals, not romantic fantasies, but concrete emotional objectives. Decide what actions reflect those values. Then observe. When those actions emerge, even subtly, respond with awareness. Let your feedback be aligned with your truth, not your fear. Let me pause to name something uncomfortable. Some women shape relationships toward dependency without realizing it. You may over-reinforce weakness, constant texting, or emotional leaning, thinking you're being supportive. But if you always reward anxiety, you may be teaching a man that closeness only happens when he's lost, broken, or unsure. This creates codependence, not connection. The most powerful feedback is not just emotional, it's evolutionary. It encourages growth, not repetition. Skinner believed that environments could teach new behaviors if shaped carefully. The same is true of love. When you reinforce what aligns with integrity and go silent on what doesn't, you stop reacting and start reconditioning. One woman I worked with, let's call her Lila, spent years in a dynamic where her emotional caretaking kept her partner passive. Every time he struggled, she swooped in. Every time he avoided conflict, she softened. But when she stopped reinforcing his disengagement and only met him with presence when he initiated clarity, something shifted. Not overnight, but slowly. The air changed. She wasn't punishing, she was shaping. And if he hadn't adapted, she would have walked, because she had redefined what deserved her feedback. That is freedom. Skinner would ask, are you reinforcing the behavior you desire or the one you fear losing? Now ask yourself, what would happen if I became deliberate about what I reward and what I allow to extinguish? Transformation doesn't begin with demands. It begins with noticing, responding, reinforcing what's true, not just what's familiar. A woman's silence can be louder than her voice, her presence more commanding than her explanation. In a world that urges you to talk more, give more, try harder, Skinner's work whispers a quieter truth. Behavior, not words, builds the foundation of lasting connection. By now you've seen that relationships don't thrive on emotion alone. They thrive on reinforcement, on the daily, often unnoticed exchanges that shape how safe, valued, or seen a person feels, and more importantly, on how much agency you feel in your own responses. Let's return to the core insight. Behavior that is reinforced will likely continue. Behavior that is not will likely fade. This is not manipulation, it's natural law. We are all responding to consequences, whether we realize it or not. So, what have you been reinforcing? Think back. Have you smiled through disrespect? Reached out after stonewalling? Stayed close after lies? That's not weakness, it's conditioning. But conditioning can be undone. And the power to undo begins the moment you stop reinforcing what hurts you. Let's recap the principles you've walked through. Positive reinforcement strengthens behavior by adding something desired. It's not flattery, it's precise attention. When a man shows up emotionally, speaks with accountability or respects your needs, how do you respond? A warm look, a sincere thank you, a subtle leaning in. These are not concessions. They're signals. I see this. I value this. I want more of this. Strategic reinforcement schedules matter. Consistency builds trust. Intermittence breeds anxiety. You can't control how others operate, but you can choose the schedule you follow. You can reward clarity with closeness. And withdraw when chaos or confusion persists. Shaping gives you a method to build, not through demands, but through guidance. If you're waiting for someone to change, consider this. Are you rewarding the direction of change or waiting for a perfect leap? Small steps matter, but only if you're awake enough to notice and reinforce them. Withholding reinforcement is not cruelty. It's emotional clarity. When disrespect or avoidance is met with indifference, not panic, its power weakens. Extinction happens, and in its place something new can emerge if the environment, you, stops sustaining what no longer serves. Skinner never romanticized human behavior. He saw it for what it was, shaped, patterned, repeatable, but he also believed in possibility, that if we understand our environment, we can redesign it, that freedom is not found in reacting to everything, but in responding to the right things at the right time for the right reasons. So ask yourself now as we close, what feedback have I been giving without knowing it? And starting today, what am I willing to reinforce with my attention, my energy, and my time? You don't need to fix anyone. You only need to understand your influence and use it wisely. Because the woman you're becoming doesn't reward confusion. She reinforces clarity. She doesn't chase, she shapes. And she knows that silence is also a response, and sometimes her greatest healing. If this reflection spoke to you, I invite you to share in the comments. What feedback pattern have you recognized in yourself? What would you like to change? And don't forget to subscribe. There's much more to explore in the emotional science of love, autonomy, and female power. Until next time.